Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the NevilleGAZSP podcast. I'm your host, Bryguy7571. With me, as always, is my good buddy, Anders. Anders, what's going on?
Hey, good to see you guys. And we just had an awesome dinner tonight. And now we're going to do a special different episode. So I'm super excited about tonight.
We're doing face-to-face again because we kind of felt like it works better that way. With us tonight, though, we have a very special treat. I know a lot of you guys have been asking to talk to some people that I've worked with and kind of hear their stories, their journeys. So I brought tonight, we have our good buddy. For the purpose of this conversation, we'll refer to him as Jack. Jack was probably one of the most fun clients I've ever had. Jack has come a very long way from when I first met him. And we'll get into all that tonight, but just a great story. So Jack, hello, how you doing?
Good, guys. It's very good to be with you guys tonight.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Yeah, I'm so excited.
My pleasure.
All right, Jack, so let's get into it because everybody's probably like, hurry up and talk about it. Let's kind of talk about where you were when you called me.
So when I messaged Bryguy, quite a few years ago now, I was freshly broken up. My SP did cheat on me, which is, I'm sure a lot of you guys are going through that right now, and I'm sorry to hear. And I was in a very, very distraught place. Sorry?
I think did she move in with him too?
Not to my knowledge.
Oh, not you. Okay. So they just got together and she broke up with you. Okay.
Yeah, I didn't investigate.
So a lot of you guys in this same place. So that's why I wanted to bring Jack on so you could hear that, the third party is not going to stop it from happening.
Absolutely not.
So when Jack called me, like he said, he was in a really bad place. And I think you were maybe a little surprised at first that we weren't going to work on her at all, even, right?
Yeah, because that was a stark contrast to, I've been through a lot of other, and I use the term loosely, coaches and all sorts of other programs that were taught law of attraction, and I use that term in quotes, and other Neville sort of subs. And yeah, it was Bryguy's approach was a stark contrast to all of them.
Yeah, so you had been taught, work on them, do whatever techniques, and I was like, we're gonna not forget about her. We're just not gonna work on her yet because we've got to fix you, and then that's what's gonna make it easier to believe the news story about her. So the first thing we kind of talked about was, what was your story in regards to you and love? So if you want to kind of maybe tell them what you were thinking back then when it came to you and love.
So yeah, when that all happened, my perspective on love was pretty much just flipped 180. Didn't know what to think at first, and it was just not what it used to be. I used to think it was so pure and undying, and it can be, but that's not what I was telling myself. I told myself that it was cruel, but that it probably shouldn't happen to anybody else. That I wouldn't let it happen to anybody else.
Wow.
And it wasn't what it was supposed to be at all.
Yeah. So you had a really bad story just about love in general.
Yeah, it wasn't in a good place at all.
And did you find that even before her, so were you kind of telling that story with any woman or anybody that you were with?
Well, she was my actual first proper relationship. So I didn't really have any pre-existing concepts, I guess, in that context.
But as soon as as soon as it blew up, that's when you started telling that story? Or do you think you were telling the story prior to the breakup? No,
prior to the breakup, that's when I thought, it was just so pure, it would never fail.
Interesting.
But then, yeah, that all changed that one day.
Okay. So, but you did say that you were a little worried about something. You had some suspicions before she confessed.
Exactly. We hadn't been talking for like almost a week before that point, and yeah, that's when I started, putting those thoughts in my own head, feeding that fire that I just knew it would happen, and that's 100% how I knew it. I created it 100%. I could tell you the exact thoughts I had the days before.
So why don't you share those two? Because I want them to see how, you were saying at first, oh, love is so special, it never happened. But then like just a simple
change in circumstances.
Yeah, change in circumstances made you create all these just stories that were the very opposite of that. And then how the belief in those stories was so extreme or so, like there that it created it almost instantly.
Yeah, sure. I was putting so much intensity into those beliefs, like so much, like so unshaking, undeniable belief into things I didn't even know were even happening at the time.
Yeah.
And so it was so real to me that it was almost as if it already happened. And
yeah, see, that's a big thing. He says he already knew it happened. That's being in the Sabbath. He manifested, but what he did was he went into the state of the wish fulfilled for what he didn't want.
Yeah. State of the fear fulfilled.
Yeah. And he let the fear get a hold of him, and then it ran wild. But so let's kind of talk about even before you fell in love. What did you believe about you? Were you, because I mean, she was your first love, and that was a little bit later in life than a lot of people, right? Did you have stories kind of about yourself, like not being able to find somebody or whatever beforehand, and that's why you didn't get serious, or were you just not interested in, meeting somebody and kind of getting into a long-term thing? Or
well, before her, I was never really interested at all at a relationship. So I never really had specific values or beliefs about that sort of thing. I was just very casual, I had a lot of good stories about myself as a person, and I just thought I was, not being vain, but I always thought I was a somewhat decent guy.
Mm-hmm.
But then that all changed when I met her, and then I started having those good stories about myself being in a relationship with her, and good stories about her as well.
It's crazy because we fall in love with them, we feel great about everything, but the moment we think it's going to get taken from us, we get really crazy.
Yeah.
Love do some ridiculous stuff and come to some ridiculous conclusions, and then that's what will end up making it manifest. Because, like you said, you looked at it one way, but then this one little incident, and you started going crazy with the stories, like you said, to the point where you were like, I just believed it. I knew this was happening. And then you found out, yeah, it happened. So guys, you have to first do what he did, which is go back and look at the situation. Look at your stories about you. Look at your stories about you in love. Look at your stories about the SP. Are you comparing them to past loves? Are you, like with Jack, it was his first love, and you were freaking out, what if I lose this? And this is so great, and scaring yourself into thinking bad things. Like, what is it that you're doing? And that's going to show you exactly that you created what happened with the SP and the breakup.
Was there a sense of, at any point, of feeling like she was kind of your source? Like, and do you know what that means by like?
Yeah, 100% there was.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, so you were kind of making this girl. It went from something beautiful and great, like we love each other, this is wonderful, to like, oh my God, I need her.
Yeah, like I need her. Yeah, rather than it's nice to have.
And then they start being put on a pedestal, and you're thinking, you're so lucky. I hope they don't see that I'm not as good as them, kind of thing.
Yeah, when it all unfolded, because we'd been together for so long, it's almost like I didn't know how to function without her in my life on a day-to-day basis. It was such a hard adjustment at first.
But you lose your whole identity, right?
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah, I remember thinking, oh, I'm no longer a husband. I'm a part-time father. I'm like, I've lost my whole identity. Everything I've been working for all this time.
Wow.
I'm not really that person anymore. That's a big blow. It's really scary.
Yeah.
So then we start talking, and we have you work on self-concept, on you, your stories about you, loving yourself, becoming your own source. So why don't you kind of talk to them about that? And then also, I think the big thing everybody wants to ask you, because they all ask, is like, how did you ignore the 3D? How did you deal with it? And I know what you're going to say, but I want them to hear it from you before I, saying what I always say too, because it's a lesson they just got to hear. You know?
Yeah, well, self-concept was a term I've heard. That's very perhaps the most consistent term I've heard used throughout all those different communities, like Law of Attraction, Neville, Joseph Murphy, all those sort of guys. And it was because mine was not in a very good place at all. It was a very pretty much tear it down, rebuild from the ground up. It was a lot of work, and I don't know really what to say other than how to do it than just do it.
See, right? You got to just say, look, it is what it is. But if I keep focusing on it like this, it stays like this, or like what happened to you. I remember when you called me, you're like, I'm just fucking sick of it, man. I'm tired of feeling like this, and I want to do something about it.
So what do you think your, like, I mean, it's probably hard, can sometimes be hard to say, but what do you think your sort of self-concept was at the beginning? And then how do you think it evolved? And then also, do you think like you kind of always had a target in mind, or do you think like the self-concept you really wanted to have maybe evolved over time as you sort of discovered new things?
Well, sorry,
oh,
not
okay.
to,
Am I going too extraneous?
But Jack and I had a talk about, you know, him being afraid of her, never coming back, and all that, and kind of sat down and said, we're not doing this for a result with her.
Right.
We're doing this so that no matter what happens, if she comes back and you want her, she comes back, you don't want her, she never comes back, whatever. The point is that Jack is back to not only his old self, but a better version of that too.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, what I'm maybe I don't know if you're trying to answer for him, Brian, by saying that his self-concept was, oh, I'm somebody who needs my girlfriend.
No, I think what he's saying is like what happened to me is you are with them so long that you feel you've been out of the game so long that you don't know how to re-enter it. It seems very intimidating. And then, I mean, for me, it was crazy because I was like also like trying to be a dad, and like, you know, the people my age were not out there doing those things anymore either. So it was like, how do I even meet anybody now? So you kind of lose your identity, and you have to kind of rebuild it by saying, who do I want to be? And that's what he did. He started to, like, you know, figure out who he wanted to be, regardless of whether or not he was with her, the things he wanted to believe about himself. And then he started saying those things to himself.
Yeah. So Jack, whatever you feel comfortable sharing. Yeah. I mean, I don't want to, because again, this is obviously deeply personal. So, but anything you want to share in terms of where you saw substantive changes, or what you thought were like the key things in like changes in your self-concept. We'd love to hear whatever you think might be helpful to other people to hear. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, when everything first unfolded, and my self-concept was like so alone, so like my outlook of the world became so lonely, and that was being reflected so apparently in my life.
Yeah.
All my very close friends having their own very close and fantastic relationships. I would never take that away from them, but that also took their time away from me, and I'm not mad at them about it. But that's just what started reflecting towards me. Like, in everything just felt so alone.
You kind of feel like you're abandoned, and then everywhere you go, you're like, oh, they're in love. Oh, they're in love. You know,
exactly what I felt like.
Personal story with you. I was like, I knew I hit a low when I went to go jerk off one night, and I couldn't because the couple in the film, I was like, they look like they're in love. Like, I can't masturbate to this. They're too in love. They got a connection. And I was like, and I couldn't even, like, I was like, I need something weird. I was like, this is fucked up. Look at the way he's looking. He's gazing in her eyes. I can't get off to this. It was really fun. I use it as a joke because I'm like, you know, it was so ridiculous. I was like so aware of how everybody in the world was in love but me, and that I lost and I'd never find it again. And, you know, and for me, it was different because I'd been there before, and I realized you do find it. And a lot of times you find something even better. So it's a little ridiculous, but you get to that place where it feels like you're very, very alone, you know?
Yeah.
So what we had Jack start to do was work on the news story about him. And anytime he wanted to think about her or affirm anything in regards to her, we didn't say anything other than I am loved. So it was more important that he was saying I love myself than saying I am loved, you know? And this was years ago. So I've kind of switched that around more now, where I'm like, okay, what I really like you guys to do now is say your little thing about them. Like, you know, I'm an amazing or say like, they love me more than ever now. They see the good in me, but then end it with one about you, because I am an amazing husband and father now, because I am the perfect partner for them now, whatever it is, and kind of end the affirmation more on you. But yeah, I mean, but again, what I really want them to hear is when you were doing this work on you, and those attacks came, because I've shared the things that I've done. What were you doing that? Because again, guys, I mean, really, he kind of said it right. You just have to get a hold of yourself, and that's what I've been trying to get across to you guys. Is there's no secret to it. You have to just say in that moment, okay, do I want to keep going down this path and shit gets worse, or am I really, absolutely fucking sick of it, and I'm gonna fight? Would you agree with that?
Yep, 100% I would.
If you don't fight, you stay stuck.
So yeah, so it'd probably be helpful for people to hear, like, just kind of like walk us through like anything you can share about like how you would, what works for you, like how would you fight, like what would work for you?
Yeah, well, it's kind of hard to say what I did other than I just had to pull my head in and just frankly cut the shit out, because it just wasn't working. Like, I was doing the same stuff every day with no results. I'm like, no, this isn't right. And I needed to just cut the bullshit. Got real with myself and said, if I need to do this, I need to do it right. And I just didn't give in. I just didn't cave.
You wanted to. It's there, right? Like, you get attacked. You feel like you get attacked. Like,
Oh
in the
yeah,
morning,
you get pushed.
be like, So,
So you're saying instead of like wallowing in like whatever bad story you were hearing or hearing in your head, you would
punch it in the dick.
Yeah,
just
talked about doing whenever you get attacked. And I tell the people in the sub this, and that's why these conversations, guys, I think are not going to go quite the way you think they are, because you guys think they're going to reveal something like some kind of trick or shortcut. But the truth is, like we all try to tell you, you have to just be done with it and kick it in the dick. Even you used to say to me, what good is this conversation going to do, right? And go back to that Bible quote where Jesus says, show me one man who spent, what is it, a minute worrying and it did any good for him, or
yeah. And then Jesus does say, be anxious for nothing. Sure. Well, I'm just trying to see if we can get, because I think it's good to, we're talking about this on like the abstract level, and then but I was just wondering if you could, like, if we could tell sort of like a practical, concrete story, in terms of, like, every other day we're like, okay, well, hey, yeah, go watch a silly movie or something like that, or like I'd hear such and such story would happen, and then instead of like listening to that, is like, how would I ignore it, or how would I like shift focus? Like, so I was just curious if you had anything you wanted to share in terms of like kind of what you would do. Yeah.
I get you. I threw myself back into a lot of old hobbies that I'd given up.
I
hadn't gone fishing for a long time. I called up some mates and went, for a fish. I worked on my car. I did went out camping, because that ties into fishing. Just all things I just didn't get the chance to do that I just enjoyed doing.
That's
and
awesome.
Putting myself back into that place,
And we kind of
talked about that. I'm so happy we got asked this question, because this is like really good, because you can see, like, guys, how you just, something even very simple, like just being out there in the world, like, actually doing some physical stuff. And
like we shared on
like,
the podcast,
yeah,
like,
that's really
what would you be doing if they were back? Jack and I talked about that too, right? We said,
what would I be doing if I was a happy person?
If you knew she was back and you had her, how would you be living your life? And you were like, oh, I would be doing this stuff more. Because when we get stuck in the cycle of the breakup, we kind of like go inside and stay there and stay in bed and cry and beat ourselves up, instead of getting out and living our life. Because that's what you have to find the balance with, is manifesting a good life for you and then going and living a life. Because again, to live in the end, you have to go live your life like you would if they were back too. And that's what you started doing, right? You're hanging out with friends more, doing the things you cared about more. You were getting a good, a good day in, instead of staying at home and thinking about all the bad stuff. And then when you weren't doing that, you were taking care of yourself and making sure you were affirming and keeping your mental diet. And guys, Jack, you can tell them too. A mental diet is not affirming, right?
No,
Yeah.
it's completely different.
To tell us more,
Yeah,
like what does mental diet mean to you, and what did you find was helped you for your mental diet?
Well, the concept of a diet, right? A very strict regimen of what you put in.
Yeah.
It's exactly what a mental diet is. A strict regimen. What do you put in your head?
Yep.
Don't fill up on the donuts and the sugars of the mental world. Fill up with only the good stuff, only what you want to eat, which is what you want to think.
It's what you want to think. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it says in the Bible, like we are to hold all thoughts captive. And so
Mhm.
that's what that means, is that's the mental diet. It's like any thoughts which come in, like you're in control. You control them. In fact, you hold them captive. So you decide what's allowed in and out. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, your mind, like you are 100% in control of what you think. So don't ever tell yourself that your mind is more powerful than you, because it's not.
Yep.
Yeah.
You have full control of what comes in and what comes out. You need to hold yourself to that accountability.
And another thing too, I remind people who are finding it hard to believe that is to also think about, well, what often the first step for people can be, okay, observe the fact that you're getting upset, observe the fact that these thoughts are coming, and then realize, oh, the me is the person who's doing the observing. And that's kind of like can be the first step to that sort of enlightenment of realizing, like, oh, okay, these things are happening to me, but they're not me. And then once you realize that I'm the observer observing it, and that's me in my imagination, and that's the part which is closer to God, then you can start exercising that control once you've kind of made that separation. Yeah.
Well, I think we took it a little bit even further than that, where we were really trying to focus on Jack seeing that everything he was getting was a reflection of what was on the inside.
Exactly.
Like it was more than it was like a real hardcore look at, like, why am I surprised that happened? I literally argued
I
that
keep telling
with
that story. Yeah.
them in my head and
Yeah.
said that over and over again.
Yep.
And then when we got rid of those stories by kind of only telling good news stories all day too, and he didn't have time for the bad stories, good things started happening. And then you started feeling better about yourself, right? You started seeing a light at the end of the tunnel too, right?
Yeah, once things all started to line back up again, and piece, like my world was starting to piece itself back together, like a little bit here, a little bit there. Like it was the beginning of the end of the darkness.
Yeah, but we did have a moment of struggle, especially with the you pushed out, and something really interesting happened with Jack. So Jack had a lady that he worked with that he fucking hated, right? These two did not belong at all. I don't want to say you fucking hated her, but like she was pretty clear that she was not a fan of yours, and you were very much clear with her that you were not a fan of hers, right?
To say the least, yes.
Yeah, and so I was like, this is a great person to test it out on. So why don't we tell them what we had you do with her?
Yeah, exactly. So I work with this woman. I'll call her Angela. She was an older woman. I'd say she's in her 60s. I never actually asked her how old she is, but we weren't exactly close. She started well after I did, and so I don't think she liked the idea of being, I guess, not so much mentored but trained by someone much younger than her. She was very hardcore.
Yeah.
And so in our line of work, we work at that point in time. We work 2 weeks on, 1 week off.
Mm.
And at the end of, especially at the end of your second week, you are exhausted. You are absolutely like the world. Everything is the straw that breaks the camel's back, essentially. And she was going on her week's break, and that's when Brian told me, like, this is the perfect opportunity to completely change that story about her.
Mm.
Because
so I did. Because it worked.
Yeah. Because she was gone, had no interaction with her, didn't have her phone number, nothing, didn't have her on Facebook, and nothing like that at all. And so she was completely out of sight. And that's when Brian told me, we need to change her. We need to change her story. What do you think of her? Like when you look at her with no inside knowledge, what would you think of her? And I told him that she outwardly appears to be a loving grandmother figure.
Ah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
And
what.
started looking at her like that, and then through his mental diet, he removed any bad stories about her.
So anytime you think about her, you just think about the loving grandma.
Yeah, he didn't.
Yep.
He didn't with her mentally in his head. He didn't be like, "Look, you need to listen to me." Any of that, right?
Yeah. So you, for a week, you just did that for a week, and then what kind of happened?
Yeah, for one straight week, nothing like no bad thoughts in, and
Oh, wow.
she came back and she was a completely new woman.
Oh, wow.
We are now to this day super close.
Oh, for real?
Very close, yes.
Tell him what she
That's so
thinks
cool.
of you too. That's the funny part.
Yeah, she thinks I am to her now a grandson figure.
Wow. There we
So
go.
see, guys, he said she was like a grandmother figure to him, and she literally mirrored that back to him.
That's interesting because that's the implication, right? So if we think an implication, if that she's the grandmother figure, then by implication you must be the beloved grandson.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Which is, we don't always. That's actually another interesting thing too, which is is sometimes people don't think about that. Like, well, what's the implication of the story I'm telling? You know, and sometimes we can imagine our reality, but then sometimes we don't realize the implications of what we're imagining. Yeah, but this is a beautiful example of how that came for good fruit in your life. Yeah, that's so cool.
but again, he really worked more on just only thinking about her in loving ways.
Exactly.
No bad stories. It's like
exactly. But what's great about that is
that
he didn't have to do anything.
Yeah.
It was logically implied in his story.
That's what I want them to see.
Yeah.
It's like for me,
he didn't have to do anything.
Thinking that I was a loving husband in a blissfully loving and happy marriage was what it took versus having to like convince myself first that she loved me, that like I had to convince myself that I was a good husband, and it took a little work, but that was easier than the other thing. And then also saying that I was in a blissfully happy marriage, it makes it easier when you do go back, because like with you too, you were saying nice things about you, then nice things about her, right? You believed you were a good person, and then you started believing nice things about her, and then she changed.
Yep.
So, okay, so all that was great. Your self-concept, I remember being through the roof. We were testing it every single day. And you were doing really well with the testing. You were every day writing those 6 things down that we talked about. I think by the time we get to this part, it was like they were coming quickly too, right?
Yep. I think pretty much within the same day, so I had to almost write a whole new list.
Yeah, like you were writing them down, and like within hours you were checking everything off. And I remember we talked about like, okay, you're close. So now we can start doing 80% you, 20% her. Do we ever get to 50-50 here? I think you got success just from the 80-20, right?
Yeah, it didn't take very long, really.
Yeah. So then Jack starts doing 80% him. And you said this to me, and this is why I also knew, because a lot of others now since then have said this. When I said I don't think we said 80-20. We're just like, you can work on her some now. You were like, this might even been where I got 80-20 from, was because you were like, I'll work on her a little bit, but I really love working on me. I feel really good, and I love this version. I love how I feel. And I was like, okay, so like maybe 20% of the time work on her. And within a week from then?
I'd probably say 2-3 weeks, maybe.
Yeah.
It took a little while, but not long at all.
Yeah. Was the bump in, right?
Yeah.
So you're out shopping one day or out running errands, and you bump into her, like you see her across the street, I think it is, right?
Well, I went into our local grocery store. I don't think I'd actually really thought about her for close to about a week or so. It was just so spontaneous. She was just there, and that's what we got to talking.
Thinking about her in the bad way anymore.
Yeah, that's a bit better.
About her when you're dating them, right? When you're dating them, they're not on your mind 24/7. You're like, I'm at the grocery store. I'm getting groceries. Like, why do I need to think about my girlfriend all day while I'm out getting groceries? You're just living your life.
Yeah, exactly.
And so you're getting out of the way, and you're not telling a story that she's not with you, and you're living your life like you would be if she was with you anyway, which would be not obsessing over her, not going, where is she? You just, you're just doing your thing. And then you bump into her. And the first time you guys didn't say much to each other, right?
No, not really. It was a very quick exchange at first. It was almost like, I guess you compare it to someone that's seeing a friend that you hadn't seen for a while at that point.
Yeah.
But yeah, very quick exchange, but it was completely amicable.
And what did she say to you? Remind me.
Oh, I'm just trying to remember off the top of my head. She did say, like, we should see each other again, which was a massive step in the right direction at that point in time.
Yeah. Okay, so this is important, guys, because so
the decision point.
Jack saw her. She said it'd be great to see each other again. But this is where a lot of you make a mistake. I made this mistake. Jack made this mistake too. You went home and we talked about it. And what was the one thing you told me, though, too?
Well, because she didn't mention anything about the third party that he was gone or anything, I still had the assumption that he was still around.
Yeah. And we talked about that. We're like, just let it go. Right?
Yeah.
And then she ended up calling you and being like, I would love to see you, but somebody's still
here.
But if I remember it right, it was almost like she was telling you, but like not for long too, right?
Yeah, there was definitely the implication that things were changing on her end.
Yeah. Like, I'm still with them, so out of respect for that, I don't want to, but like, I got the vibe when, I can't remember exactly how you worded it, but I was like, I remember saying like, but that sounds like she's getting rid of him. She's just saying, give me a little while to get rid of him.
Yeah, that's the vibe we both got, yeah.
Yeah. And you decided then to go hardcore on just her being single too.
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead, Anders. I'm sorry.
How long had you been? How long had you guys been separated? Broken.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just trying to remember. That was quite a little while ago. I'd say at the point when we started getting to the good place, it would have been close to a year, maybe.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Cool. That makes sense. And then cool. So what did you kind of do? You kind of focused the story, or like you would tell yourself the story about her like showing up like single, or what would you do? How did you handle it?
Well, what I did was probably a bit different to what I would do now.
Okay.
At the time, I was affirming that she would be single. But what I would change about that now is I'd probably go straight to the end and saying she's already with me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I would go straight to the end. I would say that's sort of manifesting in steps, which I wouldn't advise.
Yeah, a lot of you guys like to do that. I'll manifest that I get a text, then I'll manifest that I get a call, then I'll manifest that I get a date, then I'll manifest. Yeah. And the other thing too was that we talked about that you said was a waste of time, even though it worked, but it was like, yeah, but since it worked, I shouldn't have done it at all. Was you were saying she misses you more than ever now. Right.
Yeah.
You were like,
I was always on her mind.
Yeah. Like
she's happier than ever to be with me rather than she misses me.
Well, yeah, that's what you ended up switching it to, right? You said you switched it from that to she's with me, it's done.
Yep. And when
that bigger change, quicker jump than like the first meeting, the second meeting, when you just started saying she's with me, it's done. It was like a couple days later, and then she was with you, and it was done, right?
Yep. I think it was the intensity of what I was putting behind that really sped things up.
Well, because you were doing the steps, and you were, like Neville tells you, the signs follow, they don't proceed. You have to work for the signs to start showing up. And then when you saw her too, and the way she worded that, you didn't react. Like a lot of people would have been like, oh, but she's still with them. And you were like, fuck it. I remember you saying like, I really don't care. Like, I don't want to talk about that much. He's gone anyway. And I said, well, honestly, man, the way you said that, it sounds to me like that's exactly what she's already telling you, is that just give me some time to dump this guy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you really believe that too. So you were like, well, then it's done. She just told me she's dumping him and to please just give her a minute to do that. And I'm just, over here living a great life, and like, you better hurry up and come get me. And she did.
All right, cool. I want to ask two I guess I want to make a comment and then ask a question. So one comment, notice, guys, everyone listening, what he was saying about, go straight to the end rather than doing it kind of piecemeal or in bits. Because one of the things Neville talks about is, like, don't try to put in a box like how you're going to get there to your destination. Like, you got to be open to the bridge of incidents being whatever it is. So if you're doing it kind of piecemeal, then that means that you're saying, like, oh, it has to happen in these certain stages, which I've laid out. So you're kind of like short circuiting the whole point of this, which is that the whole point of this is that you're going to be open to it. Like, I was just listening to Neville thing the other day, and he was talking about, like, well, if you imagine a rose, like, the rose is going to show up. He's saying, like, but I'm not saying that the rose is going to magically appear out of nowhere and drop into the vase before your eyes. But I'm saying the rose is going to show up. But if you, like, so you don't need to worry about, like, oh, well, I'm going to go to a flower shop, or I'm going to, whatever it is, just the rose is going to get there. And it could be any way, like, there's just so many different ways it could happen. So don't worry about it. So that was kind of like a sort of thing I got out of what you were saying. And then the other thing was, to talk to us more about, like, the intensity and what you were doing out intensely. That'd be good for people to understand.
Yeah, like, just walk us through your day.
Yeah, how would you live your day, like, intensely in this?
Yeah, so when I started getting to that good place, I keep calling it the good place, and that's what it really was. That was, like, it was a better place than what I was for sure. Was before.
Yeah.
That's definitely for sure. My day to day was pretty mundane, really. On the surface, I was going to work. I was seeing people. I was doing things. It was like, if you looked from an outside perspective, it would look like a regular day, but on the inside, it was just so much being back to the old me, and just almost just re-believing in everything as it was before, but better. And it was because of all the testing and all the work I was doing, it was just so much more real. I could trust God so much more.
Yeah, I think the testing is what really built your belief. Because, like I said, by the time we got to the end of this, you were really diligent about every day writing down those 6 things and seeing them. And then on top of that, once you started seeing them, I think that first the story was, I see them at least by the end of the week. And then it was like, I see everything within 3 days. And then it was like, oh, I see everything by the end of the day. And then it was like, I see everything within hours. And then it was like, oh, everything I write down in this book comes true.
Mm-hmm.
Everything, you were trusting God a lot more too. And believing that, look, I didn't have to do anything and these things showed up. It's gotta be me and God working together here. And, I think also the testing with the old lady really seemed to be the thing, I think, that made you finally buy into everyone as you pushed out.
I very much agree.
Yeah, because you were doing good. Even with them, you're like, well, yeah, it's great. I can get somebody to say, howdy, how you doing, whatever. But, like, if I turn somebody that I know does not like me into somebody that's referring to me as her loving grandson, then, yeah, I did something. I really am in control. These stories really do make them. But the good thing about testing with her was, if she didn't change, you could have given a shit. Right?
Yeah.
Like, if she didn't change, it's like, oh, well, she's still that way, and oh, well. But you were like, okay, I'm going to go for it and see if I can make somebody that I know is not a fan of mine a fan of mine. And then when she did, I think you were like, holy shit, it really does.
Yeah, that sounds amazing.
The testing is really crucial, guys, because a lot of you guys will tell me too, like, oh, I can, like, I'm good at manifesting some things and bad at others. Well, that's not how it works. You manifest everything.
Yeah, but I think what that probably means is they're probably saying is,
your belief
I
is
find
bad
it
for some things.
I find it hard to believe
Yeah,
that things can work out in this area. And I think what's interesting about this story is, it sounds like it's the type of thing where you were not as emotionally invested and worried about a bad outcome, but it was also miraculous outcome. So when it did work out, like, it kind of really skyrocketed your belief, because you're like, wow, this is, like, crazy. Like, this shouldn't have worked, like, on my old thinking. but it did work. So therefore, like, oh, so I can really apply this to other things where maybe I'm more emotionally invested.
But I think also becoming your own source, and then
Yeah.
also really changing your stories about you had a great impact on how you saw yourself and what you deserve too.
Yeah.
And you were thinking, I don't deserve to be cheated on. I don't deserve to be left. I don't deserve to have any of
Right.
this. And I'm over it. And yeah, it's just the end result that you were going for was what we all went for, which is I want to be good no matter what.
Yeah, like I want to feel good. I want
With
to
or
be
without my
okay with
SP. Yeah,
myself.
because
Yeah.
what attracted them was you being that anyway, to begin with.
Yeah, that's true.
We weren't obsessed with him when we met him. We fell in love with him and it was great. But a lot of you guys don't even have really good love stories. It's like we're in the seeing each other face. Like, I don't know. I think Jack, with you, with this particular girl, was different. You guys like fell in love right away. It was great. Same thing with me. Like night one, I was sold, and I was never that kind of guy either. You know, but a lot of you guys are worried about stuff that's not even anything yet, right? Like so many people are like, we're in the talking phase or this, like, I don't know. Um, those I think are really easy to fix. But you know, so Jack is an example of somebody who really didn't have a ton of bad stories, but also allowed fear to kind of come in. And I think a lot of you guys are in that place where you find somebody you like them, and then you're like, oh no, I could get hurt, and you start worrying, and then you create this shitstorm of events, you know. But it's tough to have these conversations, guys, because there's things that we want to keep private for their sake too. But the truth is, and I think Jack will agree with me, there's not much to these stories. You work on you and your bad stories about you, and then the world starts showing up reflecting the new story that you're telling about yourself. And then well, if I did that with everybody else, what's my story with them? Change that story, and then they come back. Like if you're getting everybody else hitting on you, every other ex-girlfriend or boyfriend showing up, and the one you want is not, then you still have a story about them. And that's the point of all of this. It's what are your stories? What are you pushing out? You know, when Jack was in love, she was coming back in love. When he worried about getting hurt, she came back with a reason for him to worry about being hurt. And all he did to change it was change his story, like to the point where it was just like really all the way to the end. He wasn't worried about the how, when, where, why. He was just like, fuck it, it's done. Right? That's all you were saying was, she's back, it's done.
Mm-hmm.
There was no worrying about how you were affirming it. You're like, it's God, he knows what I'm saying, and I'm saying it's back, she's done. It's done. She's back, it's done. And a couple days later, she was back and it was done. Now, guys, that's his story and what he had to say to believe. A lot of you guys hear what, and that's why I've been hesitant about having past clients on, because like we kept it simple, we kept it about them. Then we went and worked on the SP, which was really easy to do when you're really loving and believing in yourself and your self-concept. Again, not your self-love, your self-concept, who you think you are, what you think you deserve, how you think the world sees you, and how you see yourself, and all that is good. It's really hard to picture anybody not wanting to be with you.
Yeah, it's very believable at that point.
It's extremely believable that everybody would never want to leave, that everybody would want to be with you. You're the one who, again, has their shit together, and people are like, I want to be a part of that. That's what you guys all forget when you meet them. You're the person at the bar that everybody's circling around and laughing and having a good time, and they see you and go, I want to know what's so great about that person, and they come and meet you. You attracted them to begin with. You manifested them to begin with by being that version of you and having those stories of you. But then slowly we put them on this pedestal, and then all of a sudden we're not important and they think we're not important. We're not that great, they think we're not that great. We worry they're going to leave, they leave. So you got to figure out what your story is about you. And while doing that, love yourself, encourage yourself, be your own source. be your own hype man. You know, there's a lot more to this. I apologize, Jack. It has been a long time since we, did this together. So if there's anything I'm forgetting too that you did, please, feel free to share. I think we did the also too, like when you were feeling bad, asking God to show you how much He loves you too, right?
Oh,
Yeah, just putting love back into God's hands, and so he can give it back essentially in a different way.
that's awesome.
And reminding yourself, or letting God remind you how much He loves you, right?
And I guess if I might just add this, I was pretty lucky in the sense that I already had a relationship, pretty decent relationship with God. I grew up in a Catholic family all throughout high school, went to a Christian school. So my knowledge of God, while it was good, it was not the same way Neville taught it. And it was, at first, it was a tough pill to swallow that the Bible isn't secular history. But once I started, reading Neville and the Bible again, it just became so evident. It was dumb. It was amazing. I guess I am lucky in that sense. I did have that pre-existing knowledge of the Bible and God, but through a new perspective.
But you would agree that God is kind of all of this, right? Like when you want to worry about how and when and if it's possible, when you go, well, it's God, then it really does kind of take all that out. You're like, who gives a shit? Like, if anybody can do it, God can. So why even bother trying to figure it out? Let God figure it out for me.
Exactly. He was key to all of this.
Yeah. Like when you were saying, I remember you telling me, like all I really said the last couple of days was like, she's back, it's done. Because like God knows what I want. I don't have to get all wordy with it and be, like I knew that God knew what was in my heart. Like you knew He knew what you were saying, and you were declaring it. You weren't like asking Him to do it anymore. You're like, it's done. It's God. Right? And I was like, that's right, it's done. And you're like, that's right, it's done. And He's like, you're right, it's done. And then it's done. And you kind of, in a way, it's a little bit of a lullaby to yourself too that calms you down. Like I really don't have to lift a finger. Again, we all got to that place where if we could have talked to our SP, we could have shown them, not told them, but shown them how much we've changed and how different it would be. But when you also get there, you don't need or want to show them. You're like, God will show them or whatever. You're just focused on continuing to be that person now because it feels really good for you. And then you become magnetic again. And, like I always say, they'll always come back to make sure they didn't make a mistake. So be ready so you don't have to get ready. But a lot of people don't do that. They continue with the woe is me, and then the person comes back and then they're like, oh, this was the right choice. They're erect. I made the right decision.
Yep.
And then you're like, I'll never get another chance again.
Yeah, the lies continue.
Yeah, and the lies continue. But, the reason I wanted to do Jack first is because out of all of everybody I've coached, you just kind of put the bullshit to the side. Other people are going to come on and we're going to talk about their journeys, and they're going to have more things to say because they had more shit going on in their head. You were just
because they'd be like, first I believe this stupid story.
Yeah. The crazy shit you're going to hear is nuts. But like Jack was really just like a good guy and a good boyfriend, a good person. He trusted in God, and that's why this was really simple for him. But he did have to remind himself of some things, and he was very good about daily, and then also like not being afraid to test it on that woman.
Yeah, that's a great story.
A lot of you guys, like people that I coach too, I'll tell them stuff and they're like, oh no, I don't want to do that. I'm like, they're scared to work on them. They're scared to test it. Or they're like, well, do you think it, like, I don't remember you ever asking me, do you think it'll work on her? You're just like, okay, let's go do it. A lot of people are like, it'll work on her. Tell me why you think it'll work on her. What does this mean? Is it a sign that my SP's coming back? And I'm like, just do it. And that's what you're like, I just went and did it. That's why I said I think you were one of the most fun ones, because we didn't have to have hours of fucking unnecessary conversations where I'm just trying to convince you it'll work. You're like, well, yeah, let me just go test it. That'll tell me. You took a very scientific approach. You're like, well, the proof is in the pudding.
Mm-hmm.
If I do it and I get results, then yeah, it works. And you were like, but I got to really do it. A lot of you guys too, you're not really testing it when you test it. You're not really believing. You're not really trying. You're wavering in your states. You were really good about that. You didn't waver in your state. You would go get there and you would stay there all day. And I think we just had simple things like when you woke up in the morning, if you were getting attacked, I told you about that little story I wrote. So I think you had something similar. You don't have to share it if you don't want to. Or like putting on the TV in a funny movie or just right away not allowing yourself to be attacked. Going right into something good as soon as you wake up.
Mm-hmm.
It's not really that hard. And I know a lot of you are going to listen to this and be like, oh, I didn't get enough out of it. But I'm trying to tell you, there's not much to get out of this other than do the work and you'll get your person. Other than believe and you get it. Change your story about shit and you get it. It's that simple. The woman did not like Jack. He did not like her. And within a week's time of just ignoring the current 3D reality where they didn't like each other, and anytime she popped up in his head or purposely making her be in his head and thinking about her in a loving way, changed her immediately. And you were really good, man. I'll give it to you because we talked about during the day the amount of work and I think especially towards the end when you were like, it's done, she's back, you were like, every 3 out of 5 minutes I was like affirming that. And I take a little break here and there.
Mm-hmm.
But like I was like in the fucking zone. It was like on autopilot in my head. And I was just, it wasn't even so much that you were trying to convince yourself, it's that like yourself was reminding yourself over and over again, it's done, it's done, it's done, it's done, it's done. Yep, it's done. Congrats, you did it. It's done. So why don't you share that with me? Because I think that was probably pretty hard at first telling yourself any of this stuff, right?
Yeah, it definitely was. And anyone else doing this, they'll feel the same way. It just feels like you're trying to delude yourself, and I get that. It's hard. It sometimes it even puts you back. It feels like it's making you take a step back because you're going back to square one, and you feel like that pain all over again because you just don't believe it. But just keep doing it. It will pay off. Trust me. Because you say it enough times, you're gonna believe it.
Yeah. I remember one thing you said in a recent conversation we had. You said something in effect like, who'd have thought that just simply by saying something over and over again, it would make it happen?
Yeah. It still to
Like,
this day sounds so surreal.
All I did was just tell myself shit until it showed up. Only that, and I would just say it a bunch of times, or anytime it popped in my head, I would only tell that story, and I wouldn't waste any time on any bad opposite story. And I think now you have that belief. As long as I affirm for it, it's as good as answered, right? Like one of my affirmations now is anything I ask God for in prayer, He gives to me. So I know if I've prayed to Him about it, and also the way I pray, I don't pray and say, "Can you give this to me?" I say, "Thank you, God, for giving this to me." Like Jesus tells us to, right? Believe you have it, and when you get home, it'll be there. Go about your day. When you get home, it'll be there. And that's really what you're doing. You're like, I'm going to beat this into my head until I believe it. And then I'm just going to keep saying it so I don't stop believing it. And then you realize, oh, wow, it's already here. I don't have to keep going. It's already here. Right? It wasn't even like there wasn't a long waiting period. Like you would go off and do this stuff, but you wouldn't entertain anything other than it was done. And then it would show up done a couple days later.
Yeah, I was very ball to the walls with this because I was just done of living in hell.
But before you bumped into her at the supermarket, I remember we had a conversation where we were like, look, man, you're doing it till you get, what did I say? You're doing it until you're getting relief, but you're not saying it enough until you get belief.
Mm-hmm.
I need you to go past the relief because you haven't put anything out there yet. All you did was calm yourself down now. But the real stuff that goes out is when you're starting to believe it and you're not also fighting the old story. When you have the relief, you're saying it and you're not also fighting your old story. A lot of you guys say affirmations are so hard, it gives me anxiety. Yes, it's supposed to at first. You don't believe that story. But also, you haven't changed it, so it's going to stay there. So saying I don't want to do affirmations because they're tough all you're doing is saying, I love staying in hell. I believe in hell. So don't be surprised if you stay there. Like he said, you just got fucking sick of it. I just got fucking sick of it. Anders, when you had some of your big successes, you were just like, I'm fucking over this. We all got to the point where like, it's not worth it anymore. I can't keep doing this shit anymore.
So one thing I'm curious about, Jack, and hopefully I'll be able to articulate this. How do you feel, or how do you remember like feeling coming to play with this? Because there's this thing, I remember reading years ago where it's like, hey, sometimes if you're feeling bad, if you kind of like make yourself smile, then it kind of like shines through, just like making your body do the activity, like actually makes you feel better. But it kind of sounds like initially it was probably like tough, as you were saying, but was part of it kind of trying to get away to get into the feeling and be of excitement and being like, it's done, or was it a lot of it just sort of cracking away at just saying, okay, it's done, and sort of wearing out the old negative story, and then eventually kind of stepping into that feeling, or how did those two coincide, if at all?
Well, again, I don't want to interrupt him, but when we talk about feeling, you have to be really careful, because a lot of people think feeling is, I don't understand. I feel good. I feel positive. You've seen me be fucking just super angry about somebody taking forever, like with some of these corporate things, and then being like, that's it, I've had it. You're fucking doing it now. And then they do it. Yeah. So I wasn't happy. I wasn't positive. I wasn't on some frequency or wavelength. I was just like, I'm tired. I'm in control. So you're just going to fucking do it now.
Right. And then, okay. Yeah. Then there's the sense of good point. So
there's the feeling.
There's a feeling of sometimes of being there and being like happy and thankful. Sometimes there's a feeling of living in a moment and sort of just almost like you can see yourself in the end goal. There's that's another
that's
example.
That's the feeling. You don't care about your all being happy or sad or whatever it is. All that is are you thinking about something the right way or the wrong way? Yeah. Right? Because those feelings are going to betray you anyway. They're coming from your beliefs. Mm. So if you're feeling sad, what you're saying is, I actually really believe the bad story. So no matter how many fucking success stories I read, however happy they make me, it doesn't matter, because as soon as I go back and look at my beliefs, they're going to affect those feelings and get rid of them. I can read a success story and then think about what I really think about something and be like, oh, well, none of that, fuck all that success, like, and get sad again. But what we're talking about is the feeling that the shit is done. And sometimes it does at first feel like you're lying to yourself, but you keep saying it like you're just pushing against this wall. Or like I joked around before about like the whole conversation thing, where you just feel like, okay, I know the shit is crowning, and one more push and I'm done. One more push against that wall and it's down. One more push and that, that fucking turd is that, like, I mean, I don't know any other way to describe it, but it's like this feeling that you have said it enough to where you're like, it's just fucking done. It's hard to explain until they go do it. And that's what he's saying too. Like I'm saying, that's what I'm saying. You guys, this is not going to be like what you guys think. Where like, I see a lot of these other coaches where they interview people and they're like talking about this, and I'm like, none of that shit is relevant to the success. It's just little things you did to make yourself feel better, so that you would pick yourself up that day and do the work. What Jack did was just say, even if I feel like shit, I'm going to get up and fucking fight. I'm tired of this. Fuck her. Fuck everything. I want to feel good for me. Right. And when you do that, that's when you get the quickest results, I think.
Well, that's what I was saying. So you're saying like, but what is it? But that's what I'm trying to ask Jack. Like, but you're saying like,
you can't.
I want to feel good for me.
It's like on the job training.
That's fine.
Yeah, it's that's what I keep trying to tell people. People are like, I don't get it. Explain it. I'm like, it's hard to explain. You have to go do it. And it's like on the job training, right? You're so intimidated when you first start a new job, but then 2 months later I see you and you're like, oh, this shit is easy. You're doing it with like your eyes closed, like you're like, oh, watch this. Oh yeah, I can do this. Like, I remember a job I had where there were so many things I had to enter into a computer and then say things and talk to people, but then they had it all scripted for me and it seemed really intimidating. But after a month of doing this script and then following this rhythm, I was literally like ordering lunch and shit and doing 20 other things while talking to the person and hitting a button. And I was like signing things and like, looking up like what car I was going to buy. Crazy. It's like second nature. Yeah.
Because you've been running the same script or whatever.
Yeah. And that's what I need these guys to see, and why the repetition is so important is because it beats it into your head. And there comes a time when you're just like, I've said this enough. I know I've said it enough. I don't know how to explain it other than maybe it's God that gives you the feeling like your battle is done, but you get to that place where you feel like, oh, I've been hurt. I've been hurt.
There we go. So
Right?
Jack, what are your thoughts? So what was your experience?
Yeah, so to tie in with Brian saying it's on the job training, it really is. And I think what helps, which would help other people, is get yourself excited about doing the work.
Mm-hmm.
Like wake up and feel like what can I do today? What am I going to do today? Like make something exciting happen. Make yourself so keen to do the work that you just love doing it.
Yeah, do it for you, because that's why I try to help them. If they do it for somebody else, they're going to be looking for results. When you do it for you, you see the results, because the results are you. You have a better life. Things just start working out for you. The world around you becomes friendlier and nicer and easier to deal with. But also, again, it is like, I think I shared the story with you. The first time she left, she was gone for like 3 or 4 days. And she said, I'm going to stay for a month with my family, and then we'll go to marriage counseling and stuff. And then it hit me like, oh shit, like, all right, they're back. It's going to happen. But I wasn't sad. Like the day before I was sad because I was like, I don't get to see my daughter every second day. I don't get to do this. I don't get to wake up with her. But then when I realized they were coming back but they were going to stay at her mom's, I was like, so tomorrow I get to sleep until 11 instead of waking up at 5. Tomorrow I don't change any shit diapers. Tomorrow I don't have to do feedings. I don't have to do anything. Grandma's taking care of all that. And at the end of the night, I get to go meet my wife and go to dinner and have a date and hook up. Holy shit. Things are really good. And I was really enjoying that. And I was just, and then a week into it, she's like, what are you doing tonight? And I was like, oh, I'm watching Batman versus Superman. And she's like, I wanted to see that. And I was like, oh, do you mind if you don't really care about this stuff too. She's like, no, I do. I want to see it. And then she's like, that's it. We're coming home. And I was like, fuck. Like I had a whole month, I thought, where I was going to get to, drink grape soda and eat Taco Bell and catch up on every movie I hadn't seen for the last year with a baby. And I was like, this is going to be great. And as soon as I was happy with that version of my life, and I was like, and they're coming back anyway, it doesn't matter. They were like, we cannot wait to come back, And I think a lot of men do that too. Like men joke around about like, as soon as our wives find out we're having fun, they'll be like, knock that shit off, So I kind of look at it like, oh, she finds having fun, she's going to want to come back. I should have kept my mouth shut. Like I remember one of my friends telling me, dude, you should have just acted like you were over there, like really, deep in self-reflection and you need that time instead of telling her you're watching superhero fucking movies and eating takeout all day. Like she wouldn't want to come back. She'd be like, oh, let him have that time to himself and he's really growing. And, but also because I didn't do that when she came back, my old stories came back and she left and it was much worse the second time, So, but that's how you have to do it, is like, you get to this place where your life is just great. And you're just living your life and they're going to come back, but you're also kind of like, but if they don't, who gives a shit? Like, I didn't really notice they were gone today either. Right. Wouldn't you say that's kind of how it feels?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. You're just like, that's great. It's like when you're dating them, right? If you go out to the grocery store, you go out the night, you're not like thinking about your girlfriend all night. And I got to call, you're just like, I'm out with my boys and we're having fun. And then there does get that point in the night when it's later, you're like, hey, babe, I missed you. I'm going to come home. And you're like, okay, great. But the rest of the night, you're just like, well, no, I'm not going to be writing that shit now. I just got here. I'm going to go have fun with my friends. Like, I don't have to, do a wine and cheese party with, her friends that I don't like and shit. Like, these are my guys. We're going to do what we like to do. We're going to reminisce and catch up and joke around about shit. And the last thing you're thinking about is, her and missing her and shit like that. We walk around when we're in the bad place. No matter what we do, we're missing her. You remember, like we would go out places, right? I couldn't stop talking about her. I'd be like, oh, I noticed all these happy couples, and everybody's like, just shut the fuck up about it, man. Just have a good time, And I think when you get there with the on-the-job training, the testing, it just becomes so clear that it's gonna happen. That I don't know, maybe like I think some people I've seen, they're so not worried about it. They're just like, if I could get an extra day without her, that would be great. So I can just, wrap up and have one last day where I'm allowed to do whatever I want. I don't have to worry about anybody else or the consequences of my actions. Like I'm really kind of digging this, like back to being myself and having fun thing and no one to answer to, and then that's of course when they show up, and I think you got to that place where you were just like, we would talk and you'd be like, no, life's just really good. You wouldn't even want to talk about like everything you were saying about it. You're just like, no, life's really, man, everything I write in this book shows up. The money was better. I remember you saying in the beginning you didn't really care much about money. You've never been a materialistic guy. And then you were like, yeah, money's kind of fun. I kind of dig
it's all right.
that tune changed real quick. I just never had it before. Now I got it and I realized it's actually a lot of fun, you know? And you were like planning all kinds of stuff without her, like, you know, like I have a client who did that and he moved all the way across the country. He didn't give a shit. He's like, I always wanted to live in California. And he's like, if she's coming back, she'll just move to California. And I said, now I know you're getting her, because he didn't give a shit. He was like, I'm not waiting here for her and then going. I'm going to California, whether she gives a shit or not. And she's like, I've always wanted to live there. I'll move there, of course, if it means we can be together, you know. And then he's like, great, you know. And I think he made her pay for it. He was like, pay for it. You want to move here? Move here. Great. Where I'm having fun over here. It's awesome in California. I think you'd love it, you know. And I think she thought he was going to help. He's like, well, you know, you're the one moving here, not me. I already moved here. You know. And she's like, well, whatever I got to do, I'm going to do it to get there. So it went from like, I never want to see you again, to like, if I got to go work 2 jobs to be with you, I will, you know. But again, he just didn't care. He's like, be here, don't be here. Either way, I'm good. And that's really where you got. I think that was the secret to it, was you were just like good either way. You were like, my life is just good. And you became super attractive again. Like when you first met her, you didn't need her anymore. She was complimenting, or you were complimenting her. And then you turned it into she was complimenting you, you know? Mm-hmm. So, and that's what I'm trying to explain to everybody, like, because they all want these. The other thing they want is, what did the SP feel like? And the SP is going to tell you, I just felt like it was my choice to be with them. I couldn't stop thinking about them, and it felt natural to want to go back to them. They all want this dramatic, like, movie journey. And I try to explain to people, and Jack, I'm sure you're learning this now as somebody who's getting into that industry, that regular stories are fucking boring. Right? When you're writing a screenplay, you got to punch it up. Right? Even if you're writing off I think of the movie The Vow. And I remember once making the mistake. My wife loves that movie and thinks it's so romantic. Making the mistake of Googling true story of The Vow.
Oh, right.
And the guy is the complete and total physical opposite of Channing Tatum. He's like
most guys are the complete opposite of Channing Tatum.
He looks like, imagine the biggest chode you've ever met. Awkward guy. And you start to realize this isn't super romantic. It's just they were both so unattractive that even after she lost her memory, because there was no other ex-fiance like in the movie and all that, she was just like, wait, someone loves me? Okay, I'll take it. Fuck it, I'll take it. I don't even care if I don't remember him. No, fuck it, I'll take it. And he was just like, I'm never going to give anybody else. You're never going to give anybody else. And you're like, okay, great. Who cares about the accident? But the movie makes it sound like she had gone through this change where she went from like going to law school and doing what her family wanted to realizing she's an artist and taking that journey. And he was trying to get his recording studios. None of that shit was part of the story. They were just 2 regular working class people, got in an accident. The wife forgot about him and was like, I don't think I could do better now that I'm looking around. I don't think and they got back together. But the movie makes it sound like her old fiance showed up and she only remembered a time when she was with him. So she was automatically still in love with him and fight to get her back. Everything every woman wants. Fight to get her. You know? Not true. Movies are dramatic, and people, I think, get caught up in that shit and want this mellow. Like, so many people, that's kind of why I stopped posting, but I used to love posting. We talked about this, the Spider-Man clips. Remember, I would send you the Leap of Faith and the Rocky stuff, and like when you do feel like you're getting punched, saying no pain, no pain. But like, I kind of thought, because people wanted to be like Luke Skywalker, and then they get to the end and be like, oh, all I really did was feel good about myself, and they showed up. It's not so fucking dramatic, you know?
Well, I think that's an interesting thing to think about too. It's like, yeah, maybe the flip side of that is maybe there's a lot of like hidden drama in our ordinary, like boring lives, you know, which you can see, you know, but at the same time, it's like, yeah, you try to describe it to somebody else. It's like, yeah, it's a big deal to you. But, you know, at the end of the day, it's like, yeah, you know, I just kind of, you know, I just believed and it worked.
Yeah. And Jack, we had this talk a couple weeks ago, right? Because I was like telling you, I'm trying to put together a book and just go over your story again with me. And when I finished with you versus some of the other people, I was like, wow, he really like listened and gets how simple it was. Like a lot of people, I keep trying to tell them it's simple, you're complicating it, but you just got it and you kept it simple. And I think that's why it happened so quickly too. To the point where you're like, I could have even made it simpler by not wasting time saying she missed me. She was thinking about me. Instead, I jumped to, nope, she's just back.
Yeah, like cut out the middleman, you know.
Yeah. I think in the beginning we need to do that because, like, I'm not gonna lie. I told you the story about saying they're obsessed and how dangerous it is. At first, it makes you feel good to think, okay, they're obsessed with me, but then you see the obsession and you're like, this is fucking nuts. Like, they're trying to crawl up my ass and die right now if they could, you know. And so you be careful what you say. You know, like I saw another interview with the guy telling his SP success story, and he said the same thing. He's like, I made the mistake of saying she was obsessed with me, and the girl was with him in the video, and she's like, and I just can't, he can't even go in the other room without me missing him. And I was like, oh God, that would be annoying. So, and you can see on his face, he's like, yep, it is. He's like, you don't have to go everywhere, you know? So, yeah. And he said, like, he made a joke to the point she was so crazy about it that he couldn't go to the bathroom without her bothering him, you know? Like she would knock on the door, are you okay? He's like, it's been 10 minutes. Like, give me some peace, you know? So he warns too, like, be careful with saying they're obsessed, you know? And so, I mean, again, I know maybe for a lot of you guys, it's not as dramatic and magical as you wanted, but Jack did have those moments like I did too. He was getting him from all of his testing, right? You would come back and tell me what you manifested with the testing. And there were cool little stories like me with the sunglasses and, you know, some of the other stuff I've shared. You were having stories like that.
Yeah, actually, Jack, is there another story you'd like to tell? I mean, I love the one about the woman at work, but is there anything else you'd like to share?
So could you repeat that? You cut out a little bit there.
Oh, I'm sorry. Do you have any other stories you'd like to share with us? I love the one about the woman at work, but I was just wondering if there's any other stories which you think might help people.
Yeah, because I suppose I can tell a story about the company takeover that you guys think is relevant.
Cool. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, well, so I was working for this company, doing what I was doing. I'm a chef by trade.
Yeah.
And so I worked for this company for I'd say nearly close to 3 years, and just out of the blue, it was a hostile takeover. So our company lost the contract to this site. So then this whole new one day just went to work. It's a normal day. About around lunchtime, we get the call, come to this meeting area if there's something's going down.
Yeah.
And the whole company our contract has just been terminated on the spot. Our bosses just weren't meeting the demands that were requested by this parent company, and effective immediately, we're all stood down, leave site.
Wow.
It was very intimidating, of course. One minute you got a job, next you don't. But me knowing Neville and God, I wasn't too worried about it. Either I'd find a job somewhere or whatever. As most of my co-workers and I were all transitioning out of the site, me and two more all pulled aside, said, we need you guys to stay. We can't do this. We can't do this with all new staff. So we got very lucky. And with this new company, we all got a higher wage as well.
Nice.
And so it all worked out for the best. Obviously intended for everyone, all my other co-workers, to find successful employment elsewhere, because I was a little bit worried for them. But then I just put their fate in God's hands. But I was really, really well taken care of.
And Jack, you made a post, I think a year or so after your success story. I think you made a couple where you're like, guys, it keeps getting better. So why don't you share some of the like post, SP success story, all the other things that have shown up too now.
Yeah, so right after my time with that company, I transitioned into a new role. Being of Aboriginal descent, I got a job as a cultural heritage officer, which is a very well-paying, well-respected position within the gas industry, and a very crazy job. 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. It's great.
Wow.
Very, very, very good pay. I do very, very, in all honesty, very little, because we survey land, do paperwork. There's nothing to it. It's just a very fun position. I work with great people, love them all very dearly. That's just one story there.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's funny too, because there are definitely a lot of jobs where people have to like work really hard, but it's surprising the number of people I've met over the years, and myself included, who have like really cushy jobs where it's like you get paid good money and they don't really they're really hard.
Yeah. You don't like not only work that hard, you don't have to work that long either, right? Like,
yeah.
you just kind of take off whenever you want. Like you literally half the month you're on vacation.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
Like you work half the year.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Cool. So what else happened? Which you want to share?
I can't think of anything that's really exciting.
No, but that's great. It sounds like a really cool job, and I think that's really awesome in Europe. And now, do you think that's something where you had intended to get some sort of position, or something had been on your heart, or were you just kind of like gliding through life, like, hey, everything's like working out great for me, like, hey, thanks, God, for how you've been hooking me up, or I don't know, was there anything behind, or which happened antecedent to you getting that position?
Well, I was very cruisy in life. I still am. I do just glide through. I'm very content with everything. I'm not. You'll find not much really phases me at all.
No.
But I guess I was keen for a change. I've been working that job for, nearly 3 years. I loved it. Like I did love it, but I was desperate for something different. So I guess maybe without even trying, I did manifest those better outcomes.
That's great. Yeah. So instead of sitting around feeling sorry for yourself about, how you're tired of this job, instead you manifested just something new, which you love. It sounds like a really cool job.
Didn't you find another place too, like a beach house or something like that?
Yeah, I don't have it anymore. I decided I didn't really want it. I had a nice rental on the Gold Coast, a very long lease rental, and it was a beautiful little unit. But I like going to different places. I didn't want to tie myself down to that one location.
Nice.
Yeah.
So I like going to other bigger hotels, like the Q1 or the Meriton, anything like that.
Yeah.
I didn't want to tie myself down to this one little unit.
So you guys see what he did? He started to just live his life again and live it like he would if she were back, right? You were going and hanging out with friends, getting back into your hobbies and your likes and stuff. And I think what happens is when you get to the relationship gets weird, you abandon all that stuff and you try to think I've got to save the relationship and I can only focus on this. And you kind of give up a lot of yourself and lose yourself, and then you lose them, and then you're like, well, fuck me, now what? And then slowly as you're building up, and again, there's a big difference. We had him do a lot of work on self-love because one of the things was Jack needed to love himself. First love's really stuck with your head because you feel like you're never going to find that again. It's the first time you've had it, and you don't realize, oh, you can find that again. You could throw a rock and hit 8 other people and find that again. But
exactly.
the first, you're like, oh, I'll never find that again. You don't understand. I've been single for so long, and then I met her, and she changed everything, and but you got yourself back. And then you changed your stories about yourself. You changed your story about yourself with that woman. Instead of she hates me, you said, like, she looks at me like a grandson. She's a loving grandmother to me. You said, here's your script. The role of mean, nasty coworker, is gone. And I'm now replacing your role with you're now going to play nice grandmother type to me.
Mm-hmm.
And a week later, she comes back. That's why I tell you guys, no contact. Not because it's a psychological ploy. It's because it's really hard to change a story in your head while looking at the story you don't want to see. But I think that really was the thing that really got you to be like, oh shit, it's all in my control.
I think so, because I was after reading Prayer, the Art of Believing, chapter 5. That's when Neville starts really talking about like the idea of telepathy and everyone is pushed out, and that's probably my favorite of his books.
Quote that one to Anders all the time too. I was like, we got to do a podcast on this one. Some of it was confusing at first when I read it. I would literally write and be like, what the fuck does this mean? He's talking about telepathy, and I remember I forgot at the beginning about the telepathy thing, and I would tell people at first, like, there's no such thing as telepathy, and I was like, wait a minute, there is. I forgot when I reread that book. I was like, there is telepathy, so. But I meant like Neville's not saying to you like you're going, no, Jack, call me. back.
No, not like that.
Yeah, no, like picture them in your head, have the mental conversation with them. And then also, if you're going to bother doing that, you might as well, if you can get to that place, hear them tell you the things you want them to say. You know, and the crazy thing is, people will tell me they can't visualize, and then I'll purposely say something, make a little story, and like, no, stop saying that. It's putting it in my head. I can see it. Like I'll say, well, you know, if you don't do this, you might as well just picture them with somebody else and that person living that way. And like, stop saying it. I'm seeing everything you're saying. I'm like, well, you just said you couldn't visualize. No, you can. You just don't want to visualize the good story. You want to visualize the arguments in your head, the circle, right? Like where you're like, I love them, I believe, but then this happened, and I've been there. The circle sucks. You know, you're changing states constantly. One minute you like you love them, and the next minute you're like, but then you did this, and then you love them. You're like, but you said this, and you got to just be like, forget all of it. Like it was like, I think that's what really helped you. You saw that you gave a script to this woman, and she played the villain.
Mm-hmm.
Her role from villain to loving sweet grandmother. And a week later, by just leaving her alone and not telling anything bad about her and only saying new things about her, she showed up that way. But also, you didn't care if she showed up that way, right? Like, it wasn't going to be the end of the world if she wasn't nice to you. You would have just persisted. Yeah, you were just kind of like, if it works, great. If it doesn't. But a lot of you guys test stuff, and then you put all the pressure on the test, too. You start going, well, when are they going to change? What's going to happen? And then you transfer all the thing you're doing with the SP wrong to the person you're trying to change wrong to test it, and it just doesn't work. You got to just say, it's done. We get along now. She looks at me like a grandson. But the quickest way to get there is by loving yourself, showing yourself God loves you, your self-concept too. All that is related. Like the amount of love you have for yourself is equal to the amount of love you think God has for you. You know, your self-concept is all based on what you think you're worth and what you think God thinks you're worth and what you think God will give you and what you deserve and whatever stories you're telling about yourself. You know?
Yeah, that's super important.
Yes.
Those stories. It's often what a lot of this stuff seems to boil down to is people feel like, you know, they're missing out or they're being denied something or God doesn't really love them or God's not really showing up for them, and that's why they're, you know, and other people aren't showing up for them.
And I'll give you credit, man. You were better than me because even when I got some of those things, I would go right back to Dad. Well, somehow my glasses ended up all the way from the fucking Upper East Side or West Side on a train earlier in the day back to me, and you know, in Williamsburg later on that night, and I'd be like, that doesn't make sense. That's crazy. And then like the next day, I'd wake up and be like, oh, but he's still not, you know. And you're like, why do I get all these consolation prizes? And, you know, but you were really good about just being like, nope, that worked. That proves it. Nope, that worked. That proves it. Nope. Okay, this shit definitely works. And then you were like, fuck missing me. You're just, you know, and you were the way I knew you were going to be good too is when you bumped into her that time and she texted you later, sorry, I got to get rid of this other guy. You were like, I don't even care. It doesn't faze me. She's mine. You were already convinced you were back together with her.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why 2 or 3 days later, or however long it was, she was back. You really could not be convinced otherwise. I think we need to explain it to him. Like you really had said it so much that you had moved any bad stories out of your head. And you build it up. It's done. So everywhere you looked in your brain, it was just like over there it's done, over here it's done, here it's done, here it's done. There was no place left in your brain where you're like, but it might now, but this, but you were just like, no, this shit is done. You were living your life like it was, because I remember you were just living your life, and then when she messaged you, like you weren't that surprised. Right? And then you didn't even bother getting back to me right away. You just went and enjoyed it.
Yeah.
What happened? You're like, oh, sorry, man. Like things were really good when we met up, and yeah, we're back together. Thanks. I was like, well, shit, tell me more. But you're just like, oh, good, man. Everything's just great. It's like I thought it was. You know, it wasn't like either like you were like, holy shit, it works. You're just like, of course it fucking works. Like you were just like, whatever. I'm back together with my girlfriend. Of course I am. I said she was back. You know, it was very matter of fact for you. Like you couldn't have convinced you otherwise. You know. So all these people who have SPs and stuff, he just decided. I don't think you thought about the person once, right? Like we talked about not giving them any attention at all, not even saying they were single, anything, just like being like, nope, they're with me. It's done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
You know?
it's like he didn't enter my mind at all in the later
Yeah.
stages. That's how he went away.
And just you took it to the simplest place, which is she's back. It's done. You know, like if somebody asked you, so what's going on there? Oh, she's back. It's done. And then you just kept saying that. You were like, fuck missing me, fuck bumping into me, fuck texting me. Like, you're back. It's done. None of this would have happened if you weren't going to be back anyway. So let's just skip to that part and stop doing this step-by-step shit and just come home.
Yeah, skip the steps.
Yeah.
They're just so unnecessary.
Yeah. Everybody who does the step method comes back later and they're like, I should have just gone to the end. I should have just gone to the end. You know? But this is what Neville did, what Jack did, right? Neville doesn't go into all this great detail about heartbreak, and he's just like, nope, I don't accept that. This woman, like he says to you in the book, he doesn't really get into it. He's like, I met my wife, and I knew I wanted to be with her. And I could have sat there and thought about the fact that I had a wife already who wouldn't divorce me for like 10, 15 years, whatever it was. I could have thought about the roommate who was in love with me. I could have thought about all this stuff. I could have thought about how she moved, but all I did was go to bed with her in my head every night. All you did was every day just tell the story. It's done. She's back. And that's what worked for you. So you guys, you got to find your story that's believable like that was to him for you. That's why you can't use other people's affirmation. I don't know how many people I told that you said they're back, it's done to, that tried to do it. And they're like, well, it didn't work for me. I'm like, yeah, but you just told the story. It doesn't work for you. So, well, then you wouldn't have told it if you didn't believe it. And if you believe it, of course, it's not going to work for you. And they're like, I'm confused. I'm like, that's the thing I keep trying to tell you. You got to watch the story behind the story. You know, and just were like, I'm kicking that story out. It's got no space in my head. You were really good about it. You were probably one of the easiest jobs I've ever had, too. I joke around with you about that, too. You know, and then you wanted to stay, too, and work on other stuff. And I was like, okay. You know, but
I think we kept going for like a year after that, close to a year after that.
Yeah, yeah. And I got to be honest, if I could pick anybody to use as an example of like what getting a hold of yourself looks like, it would, you know, there's one or two others, like the girl I talked about in the last podcast was brilliant at like just you and her both like, nope, forget all this other bullshit. I'm not going to think about it at all. And I'm only tell this new story. And at first what you guys did was you said, I know I'm getting attacked, so the way I can attack that back is by just nonstop telling the new story. And then the old story quiets down anyway. And the new story, because you say it so much and it's on your mind, it's just there living. It's taking up space, right? It's renting room in your head now and living there, rent free. And then when you go to sleep at night, you've been saying it all day and you have these wonderful dreams like you're back. Like we talked about, there were dreams I had where like I was like getting up the next morning and accidentally text you like, what do you want for dinner? I'm going to the store. You know? And they're like, what are you talking about? Like, oh shit, that was a dream. Okay. Or like you're in the dream and you're saying to yourself, it's not a dream, it really happened. Then you wake up and you're like, ah shit. But the dream is not real because you've been saying it all throughout the day. So you took it to sleep. You don't have to do sats. If you're on a good mental diet all day, it naturally goes with you to sleep. And you were really good about punching the old story in the dick and only telling the new story. It's like you really understood the concept of dieting. Because like when Anders asked you to explain it, you explained it just like I do. Like no crap allowed. A mental diet is not like for 30 minutes, I was in the state and then the rest of the day I wasn't. That's an absolute shit mental diet.
Because 23 and a half hours, you're dieting and all the other stuff.
Yeah, you're on all the other shit. Or if you do good most of the day, and then at the end of the day, you let it in, but you have such belief in that story that it just lays waste to all the good work you did.
And especially if that's what you go to sleep on.
Yeah, and then you go to sleep in that. Well, shit. That's 8 hours of bullshit. You were really good about just like, nope. It's like, I think I joked around with you. I said, you remind me of like somebody sticking their fingers in their ears going, la, 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 I don't hear any assholes. La, 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 la. Nope, I don't hear any assholes. Nope, la, 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 la. She loves me. Nope, she's back. La 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 la. I don't hear anything else. I'll punch you in the dick if you get any closer.
I can't hear you right now.
Yeah. Not doing anything but that. And then you're like, okay. And I think at first, like you said, you're doing 3 out of 5 minutes and you were like kind of a little obsessed with it, but then you started to ease up on it a little bit. Or even if you didn't, you were still making sure you had a life too.
Mhm.
So you're like, hey, I'm going to say it, all day, but I'm going to say it all day while I'm fishing. I'm going to say it all day while I'm hanging out with my friends. I'm going to say it all day while I'm working on my car. Because I think that also, like for me, like I told you, I told you about the kid who I wanted to shoot in the dick because he beat me in Call of Duty all the time. Or every record on Madden, so I wouldn't be able to think about anything. I would be saying my affirmation, keeping my mental diet tight, and then trying to beat Madden. And I was like, those are the only things that are allowed in my mind right now. You were really good at buckling down with that stuff and doing that. You're like, I'm going to go work on my car. And while I'm saying this affirmation, I'm going to be, working on the car, and then nothing else is in my head. Am I wrong? Or I think that's how you did it, right?
Yeah, no, that's spot on.
Like a super strict mental diet.
That was a strong mental diet was almost, I say almost like the only technique that I really used.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I did do sats every now and then. It wasn't something I depended on because like Brian said, like if you do a good mental diet, sats is almost automatic anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
also only real intentional technique I ever did.
Yeah. Did you ever do the emotionally charged story though? Like I told you, like whenever I got out of the like feeling place and I wanted to get back into it, I would read that little story to myself about coming home and the kid being asleep and her holding him, telling me how much she loves me and stuff like that. Like because it builds up that I don't want to say it right now because I'll get all emotional again, but it builds up that feeling of being in that moment, and I can get lost in it forever when I want to.
Yeah, I
Did you
don't
ever?
think I did have any one scenario. I don't
I'm
think I
just
ever
trying to
did
think.
like.
Would ask you. I think the big thing they'd be like is, so when you were doing this work and you got attacked, what did you do?
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think what we talked about was like having the calming statements, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was very, very important. I had my calming statement. I did do affirmations as well, but not so much. But I did do them with calming statements. Get yourself into that place of pretty much reset back to zero, then go again in that new state with the affirmations.
Yeah. And would you say you definitely were doing the affirmations way past relief?
Yeah.
You were like 100% sold on the new story, but it wasn't that it was even showing up yet. It was just you had yelled at yourself so much that you were just like we talked about it first. It was like, okay, I get it. Okay, and then later on, you're like, you keep telling it to yourself, okay, you made your point. Okay, you know what? You're right. Oh, I can see that. And then all of a sudden, that other voice that's fighting you, that gives you the anxiety and the depression or whatever you guys claim, it starts going along with you. It becomes like your hype man, And I think the anxiety and depression comes from you could have done something today and you didn't. So you get anxious that you're not doing enough. And then when the day ends and you're like, well, I don't have time to do it now, you get depressed that you didn't do anything. And then you wake up the next day still carrying that, and then you don't do anything again, and you get the anxiety and the depression again and again and again. And then you guys, in the middle of fighting all that, suddenly go, okay, I'm loved more than ever now. They love me more than ever. They want to be with me. They're my only person. And you're trying to do it about them without calming yourself down about you and God loving you, and it feels fucking impossible. So you did the calming statements we talked about. Like mine was, God always comes through for me. God never fails me. So before I said anything, I would remind myself of that so that I feel like there's nothing to worry about. What were your calming statements?
I actually borrowed those two along with a couple others. I did
That's good if they were I think in your case that was also your story. But
yeah.
again, your story is not that. My story was God doesn't come through for me. So if you believe he comes through for you, you don't have to say that, But I think you were like me. You were like, I get close, but never quite what I want. He fails me.
Yeah. A couple others I use also, I just reminding myself that God and I are one. That was a big one.
That's a good one.
And be still and know that I am God.
Nice.
Yeah, that one always makes me feel good.
Yeah, that was probably my personal favorite.
Yeah, I love being in the shower and just thinking that. And I just get in this weird, like, I don't even know how to explain it. I feel like I'm in like one of those
state of zen.
Yeah, like some kind of sensory deprivation. I just feel very like in the now, in the oneness with God. You know, I think maybe because the shower's like white noise too. You don't hear anything going on behind you or someone yelling "Dad" or "Are you going to be much longer?" Or, you know, and you kind of, are able to be present in the moment. You know, so. All right. Well, is there any other things you'd like to share before we go?
Yeah, just real quickly, I'd just like to just remind everyone how important the Bible was, and it still is. Like,
Awesome.
I remember seeing this verse from I think it was in a deleted scene from Doctor Strange, actually. The bad wizard Caecilius, he goes into a Catholic church, and he says this verse from 2 Corinthians. Have faith unto the things that are unseen, for things that are seen are temporary, but the things that are unseen are eternal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
That's
Yeah.
so I just try to remember off the top of my head, but that was the gist of it from 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 18.
Yeah. So many people think because it's not seen that it's not real, and that's not true. Just because you don't see God standing in front of you, and you don't see him embrace you and be like, or hear his voice, which you couldn't comprehend anyway, telling you, "Don't worry, it's done." You have to have that mental conversation with God too. You know, I agree with you on that too, because I've had a couple clients that got to where you got also, and like where I got, and we all kind of have said the same thing. The Neville books are great, but the more I study, the more I'm kind of also like the Bible is the gold mine, though. You know, it's where the
yeah. It's almost like Neville's like one angle of
yeah,
attack to help you kind of get into it and understand it. But
but he's telling you
it's
to read
almost
the Bible.
inexhaustible in the richness, because there's
Yeah.
like I try to read a chapter, actually probably 2 chapters every day, one from the Old Testament, one from the New Testament. And it's funny because I'm at the point where there's certain things I've read like multiple times, and so it's funny because then I'll read it and I'll be like, oh, I don't remember seeing this before, or like, oh, I didn't realize. Oh, okay. So it's kind of amazing how rich it is.
I get the Bible app or whatever.
Yeah.
I think I got a subscription to it, but it sends me daily verses, and
Nice.
it is amazing how much they are spot on with what I need to hear.
That's amazing.
It's like church too. And now that I go even more often, I used to say back in the day, like, I don't go that often, but when I do, it's like God knows exactly what to tell me. But I'm like, that's not a coincidence, because now every time you step in that building every week, it's exactly like, this past first Sunday after Easter, my daughter was dealing with some stuff, and we were talking about faith and belief.
Yeah.
And sure enough, it was all about after Jesus resurrected, and Thomas was like, well, until I put my fingers through the holes and my hand in his wound, I won't believe it's Jesus, And Jesus says to him, like, blessed are those who've never seen and believe, for they're true believers. Like, Jesus is like, dude, I'm real. You spent time with me. You saw the miracles. You didn't think I'd be able to do this. I told you I was going to do this. But you're like, not until I put my hands through the holes. The ball's on that guy, right? Like, he's got to literally put his fingers through the holes. If I was Jesus, I would have fucked him. As soon as he got in there, I'd be like, ow, oh, just, it's good. It's good. You can touch him, like, woo, and put my finger through the hole and like jiggle it, Can't feel shit. But every time you touch it, you're like, oh, ow, oh. Sorry, fucking with you. So yeah. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you, man. The Bible is, it's what all his books are about. He's not telling you everything he's telling you is coming from the Bible. He's trying to tell you that's where all the answers are. We read these books and they are great, and they really break it down, because the Bible is, if we think Neville is wordy and kind of complicated and Shakespearean, like in trying to translate, the Bible sometimes can definitely be like that. So, but yeah, I agree. The more I do this, the more I'm like, okay, all things are possible with God. And that's what gets rid of the worry, the wonder, like, how's it going to happen? Because you're like, why do I care? Like, it's God. Let him just do his thing. If you really believe God comes through for you, you don't care about all that stuff. You get this peace that comes over you, like you had, where you just go live your life again. You know, like I've had so many success stories too, where the person's like, oh, I wanted to travel again. I didn't care when they were coming back. And I knew they were probably on their way. And they even texted me while I was on vacation. I didn't text them back. And then they freaked out. And I showed up from the airport and they were on my front porch crying in the rain. You know, like, where were you? You didn't answer any of my texts. I almost called your mom. I thought you were dead in a gutter. And they're like, chill. I was in Hawaii, man. I didn't have good reception, you know? God will let it play out the way it needs to play out, which is why I tell you guys too, if they don't show up exactly how you want, leave it be and they'll still chase you. You guys are like, well, I couldn't be rude and not respond. If you're saying that, you don't get this. You don't get this. You don't understand that, like, you just let God finish it for you. Right? Like, the person left you and you're worried about, like, if you're going to be rude to them, fuck them. Let them chase you. You guys wanted that anyway. Then they chase you and you're like, I've got to answer right away. You know? I knew you were ready though. We talked about that. I was like, dude, you're just there. I remember saying, like, I'm calling it now. It's as good as done. And that was the thing with the old lady. And then I remember when you bumped into her and she said the third party's still here, you're like, doesn't fucking matter though. Like I told you, you convinced me. I was like, I agree, man. They don't matter at all. And you were like, yeah, I'm not even worried about it. And I didn't even get to talk to you the next time because you had gotten her then. And then you took forever to get back to me. And I was like, oh, it had to be really good, because if it was bad, I always know it's bad because they'll call me and they'll mess me. But when it's good, like, that's what happens is I get ghosted myself a little bit, you know? And then, like, all right, step out of the, the bubble again real quick and just give me an update, you know? So, but I'm really proud of you guys. I just would like to take time to thank Jack again for coming on and sharing. And I know it's not as dramatic and like all these other stories, but like Jack was just really good at getting a hold of himself.
That's so key.
Yeah. And he was really good at believing and trusting in God. And he was really good about his mental diet. I have the clients like Jack that have had these success stories happen in these crazy short amounts of time were really serious about their mental diet. And as you can see, they have made it a lifestyle. They went into it making it a lifestyle. They didn't go into it doing it until the person showed up. He still does this for everything in life.
Yeah, it's funny too, because we were talking at dinner about people, and there's some people who seem really have a hard time, and it seems like part of it, right, is their mental diet is always like, oh yeah, like I'm, learning about Neville, but it doesn't work for me, or
Yeah.
something, but, and that's like the real story. So it's interesting too, because like that just popped in my head, like, what if you turn that around? If you're having problems, like you can be like, okay, yeah, facing this circumstance, but God hooked me up in the past, or but God can perform miracles, or but I've seen what He's done for other people, or but when I start believing, good things happen for me, or but this
God
is what
nothing
yeah,
bad
but God
happens.
protects me, or but this is how things this is what things working out looks like. Is unexpected things happen. But God works through His bridge of incidents. Yeah, so you could that's like a have that mental diet.
Yeah, the bridge of incidents thing. I'm so tired of already looking for the bridge of incidents. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, the whole point of the bridge of incidents is you don't look for it.
Yeah,
is it happens to you, and you're not trying to predict where it's going to be.
you just trust in it that it's working and
Yeah.
that it's unfolding, and then at the end it'll be revealed to you.
I mean, a lot of this stuff is like retrospective. You know what I mean? Like, I just remember thinking about that like decades ago. Like, I'd be like, oh wow, they're like couples I know who are like getting married, and it's like all because I happened to have moved to this one place at this one time, and met some people, and then that led to other people, and I lived on the other side of the country, like meeting each other, and like that's the bridge of instance. I didn't know ahead of time what that was, but God used that, to bring like married couples together,
But again, I want to thank Jack. I want
Yes.
to explain to you guys again, the reason why I wanted Jack first is because he really just kept it simple. And you'll see, because some of the other people we have coming on, they were fighting a lot of stories, and they were fighting a lot of bad self-concept and a lot of bad self-love and all that stuff. And you'll see the difference in how long it took them versus Jack. And then you'll also see there was a point where they decided to become like Jack and just kick all this shit out. And that's what made the difference for them. And then suddenly they were where he was in, in heaven again. So, and hopefully that'll be a lesson like, okay, well, here's two people who did it. One really dramatic person and then one person who just got serious. I think I want to be the serious guy and just be done quickly, versus the person. And the one girl who got engaged, who we're going to have on next, she'll tell you, I fought him. He wanted to get rid of me. I wanted to get rid of him. Like, we were arguing over, you're fired. No, you're, I'm dropping you. And it was like,
no, I quit.
Yeah, it was like, yeah, no, I quit. No, you're fired. No, I quit. No, you didn't. I fired you. It was like, and it was like, and then she was like, I'm just tired of this shit, dude. Like, he just told me he's going on a weekend vacation with this other girl, the disrespect. And I did something I never normally do. I was like, tell that motherfucker, ask him if he's picking his shit up before or after he gets back. Because after he gets back, it'll have been on the street all weekend, so it'll probably be gone. Let him know. I was like, normally I don't tell him, but I was like, fuck him for talking to you like that. And I think she was like, wow, he really is sticking up for me too. And then she's like, that's it. I'm gonna believe in myself the way this guy does. And, and she really went for it, man. And she took a guy who was like, I can't even think about marriage for 10 years into like, you want to meet my mom? We should get married. Here's a ring. And like, no time at all. Weeks, I think, So, but again, Jack was important because I want you guys to see it's not glamorous and all. It's just you and God. And it's a really peaceful, loving, simple journey. So thank you, Jack, so much for coming on and sharing your story with everybody.
But I also think there's beauty in the results, So something glamorous about the stories you've told us today. Like, it's just beautiful, wholesome story about you and the woman at your work. But also now, look at you. You've got this like really cool job and experiences. You get to, get all this time off to go travel. You had like a beach house and you realize like, oh, actually, I had to go to all these other places. You're doing like all sorts of cool stuff. And I think that's really like wonderful, and that's I think it's going to be really encouraging for people who are listening to this.
No, thanks, God. I'm very appreciative and grateful to be part of this awesome project and to help other people as well. It's been an amazing journey, and it's still only getting better. So I want to thank you guys all for this opportunity.
That's what I love hearing,
awesome.
Is how much it keeps getting better. And like we've talked about, this has gone way beyond a coach-client situation now, and it's a friendship, and it's a good one. And we talk about movies and stuff all the time, and especially now with you wanting to get more involved in that. Like, I've said too, anything I can do to help too. And I'm just, I get weird saying that to you though, because I'm also like, but like he can do it on his own. He doesn't need my help either. And, I know too, as a storyteller, you get it. Cause the way you've talked about movies with me and scripts and like the things that matter to you in films are like the things that really get audiences behind him. And so I'm always like, no, he'll know how and when to put that stuff in his scripts and they're going to be good. So, so that's why I was always like, send them to me when they're done. Cause if they're good, I might be able to get some money behind it. So, but I know either way, you're going to be good in, whatever you do. So I'm just really proud.
I'm very appreciative and grateful for our friendship. I cherish it very much.
Me too. It's been a blessing for sure. So, all right, guys. Well, thank you again to Jack. And then
I just also want to say, Jack, I just really appreciated it too. And thank you for coming on. And I just really love all the stuff you brought up and then telling us your story. I think there's some cool insights there in terms of your journey, and everybody's journey is different. But I also love to thank you for reiterating like how you really understood God and the Bible and its importance, and also God's love for you, and that was really shining through in your life. And I think that's also a hopeful and encouraging thing.
And the saving grace,
yeah,
that's what brings you the self-concept and self-love that you need.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it's just beautiful. I think this is going to really bless people. So thank you again.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Anders. It was a pleasure to finally meet you formally.
Yes.
And I really hope I made myself clear. You can probably tell I got a little bit nervous in a few areas, so I hope I was able to make myself clear enough.
No, it's okay.
Not at all.
Again, first, because you're not you weren't dramatic during this whole process. You and I never had to sit there and me like get upset and be like, will you just stop with the fucking melodrama? Like some of the people, they're going to tell you I was really melodramatic. He would be like, oh my God, you're a fucking child here. Like, knock it off. We never really had discussions. It was just like, we would talk about like how to calm ourselves. We would talk about letting God in, all that. And you would just go do it. And then you would come back with the, you know, I'm not going to lie. Like, I think I'm sure there were clients that I would get frustrated with, and I'd be like, oh, I just can't wait to talk to Jack. Other people are so fucking dramatic, and he just gets it, you know. So, but yeah, man, again, really proud of you. Thanks again. And I know, guys, it's not super dramatic, but honestly, I would choose Jack's way over even my way or some of these other people's great stories. But again, they'll tell you too, I would have saved so much time had I not done all that shit, you know. And Jack was a smart one and figured it out and just went right to the end. And that's what we're trying to get to you guys, is go to the end and trust God. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. We hope, and again, we intend, all of us, that you got everything that you need to from this this podcast, and we're also all intending for you as well, and hoping that you're learning what you need to learn. You're trusting God. You're growing closer to Him and letting Him help you and solve your problems for you and bringing them to Him and getting the relief you need. So again, we'll talk to you guys soon. We got more of these interviews coming up, but until then, take care, and we love you.
Love you guys.